Hello, I'm Night Novel, your humble storyteller for this evening. Welcome back to 𝘏𝐿 𝐿𝐴𝐶. This is episode 3, and in the last one, we had some beautiful moments with 𝐶𝐚𝐜. Bright and cheerful, she told us of lettuce and peas, and we got water from the well. But of course, given as this is a Gothic game, this joy can't last. So let's see where it all goes downhill.
The sun's so bright today. Oh, look, it's already a bit past midday. Time's been flying much faster than it normally does. All this work made me really hungry. Are you hungry, Esther?
A little bit. She forced her words to sound nonchalant, but in reality, Esther was just as famished. Normally, she had to force herself to eat or simply forget about it all. But not today.
Oh. Is that your stomach growling?
No, it was probably just the wind.
Oh, all right then. Well, if you wait for me on the little log near the garden, I'll bring back some food for us. I'll just be a few minutes, I promise. Meet you there.
Twirling around, she bounded off in the direction of the manor, her hair fluttering wildly in the wind. Her constant energy never failed to amaze Esther. Already she could feel a familiar, deep fatigue weighing on her own shoulders, as much as 𝐶𝐚𝐜's presence helped distract her from it. But she was determined not to succumb to the feeling today. There was too much left for her to do. Yeah, you fight it, Esther. Following 𝐶𝐚𝐜's footsteps back towards the clearing, Esther made her way towards the fallen log near the garden patch. Before long, 𝐶𝐚𝐜's small figure trotted back into view, a little splash of white and pink flitting across the grass. After stopping briefly at the well, she approached Esther's chosen picnic spot with careful steps, balancing 2 bowls on one arm whilst carrying a bucket of fresh water in the other.
Here we are. I just made something small and quick, but it should give us enough energy to finish today's chores.
Beaming proudly, she offered Esther one of the bowls. It held a hearty salad topped with lentils and various seeds, a red berry glaze glistening on the leaves. Tucked into each bowl was a generous slice of warm bread, lightly toasted from the stove. Thank you. It looks delicious.
It's really nothing. But my baby lettuces will be so happy to hear that. They always like a bit of encouragement.
You talk to your lettuces?
I usually chatter with all my plants. They were the only friends I really had before you came here.
With that slightly quieter, more subdued statement, 𝐶𝐚𝐜 settled down beside her on the log. At first, Esther felt slightly awkward, caught in the wake of 𝐶𝐚𝐜's earnest words with no idea how to reply. But once the smaller girl took a bite of salad and started to munch away, Esther followed suit, her mood instantly lifting from the sweet berry flavor that filled her mouth. They took turns using a ladle to sip the water 𝐶𝐚𝐜 brought, its crisp coolness as refreshing as the morning breeze. Wow, that is good water. Remember to hydrate, everybody. Chug chug. Although they didn't exchange any words while eating, the atmosphere between them gradually settled into something calm and comfortable. Now and then, 𝐶𝐚𝐜 would glance over at Esther, offering a little smile as they made eye contact. She seemed happy just to be able to share a meal together. In a way, Esther could understand why. Normally, she preferred to eat alone. Other people made her feel self-conscious about her shyness or the way she ate her food. But somehow, 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞 quiet company didn't bother her. Now that they were a little more familiar with each other, perhaps the other girl didn't feel like she needed to constantly fill the silence all the time. That's a good step. That's a very good step. Once they'd finished eating, the two girls made a brief return to the manor. Despite 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞's protests, Esther stubbornly insisted on washing up their dishes. Her pride refused to let the younger girl handle everything, even if 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞 was probably far more capable at it. Good job, Esther.
Here you are, Esther.
When they reunited outside, 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞 handed her a large, sturdy broom, even bigger than the one she'd been using earlier. Just like with the buckets, she held a second broom that was smaller and more suited to her size. The broom was far heavier than Esther expected. It had the slightly dusty, preserved look of something that had sat unused for years, but hadn't been forgotten.
I know we've already done a lot today, so if you need to rest, just tell me, please. Thank you. But I'm fine. I can keep working. All right. You can always stop whenever you need to.
Through 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞's gentle smile, Esther thought she could detect a hint of worry. It was more than a little unexpected, considering they only just met each other yesterday.
The place we're heading is a few minutes' walk from the manor. Let's go, shall we?
Oh, now you got my interest. Motioning for Esther to follow, 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞 set off eagerly into the woods. Her excitement must have hastened her steps, for Esther suddenly had trouble keeping up with her lively pace. They hurried along a slender, winding path, and the manor's statuesque presence soon disappeared among the branches. Once it did, Esther found herself swiftly losing all sense of direction among the sea of vibrant leaves. She was thoroughly glad she had 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐞 to guide her. Otherwise, it seemed unlikely she'd ever find her way back. This is her turf, yo.
Here we are.
A short while later, they emerged into a less densely wooded area. At first, Esther thought she was imagining things. But when she looked more closely, she realized she was seeing exactly what she thought. Let me guess. A cemetery. Yep, there we go. I mean, we needed a cemetery. Like, it's a mysterious, dark story. We're gonna need one. A serene, beautiful graveyard, captured in the golden sunlight like a forgotten relic lost to time. Rows upon rows of headstones stood between the trees, each one a different shape and size. But despite their obvious age, and the fact that they were nestled in the woods instead of a proper clearing, every grave looked incredibly clean. It gave the cemetery a strange, ethereal atmosphere, with the same awe and reverence that surrounded mythical artifacts in a museum. Ooh. Not far in the distance, a large mausoleum rose upon the shore of the graveyard's pond, casting a somber reflection across the water. It caught Esther's eye, and for a moment she found herself mesmerized by its towering presence. Understandably.
Are you looking at the mausoleum? It's locked, I'm afraid. I've looked all over the manor and the grounds, but I don't think I'll ever find the key. Papa must have lost it.
Wait a minute. Key? Back in episode 1, we found a key. Oh, ah. 𝐶𝑳𝐵 offered a small, wistful smile, shaking her head. Wait, why am I happy about finding a key to a spooky mausoleum? Oh no, we're gonna go in there, aren't we? Esther pulled her focus back to the other girl, blinking. I felt like something strange had come over her briefly, but she had no idea what it was. Why do you tend to this place so closely? Is anyone you know buried here?
No, I don't know any of them.
To Esther's surprise, 𝐶𝑳𝐵 shook her head. It seemed far too insensitive to ask where 𝐶𝑳𝐵's father was buried if he wasn't in the graveyard, so Esther bit her lip and let the other girl continue.
Actually, I don't really know much who's buried here. Papa never gave me much of an answer. I added an extra word in there because I felt like it. But since this manor belonged to his family, the cemetery is probably for old relatives. All of the graves seem like they've been here for a very long time.
As her gaze drifted across the headstones, 𝐶𝑳𝐵's expression grew a little more distant again.
I don't know why, but I've always been drawn here, ever since I was a little girl. It feels so peaceful, lonely, but peaceful, and comforting in a strange way. Like a place that will always be here, always the same, as long as I take care of it.
Her words trailed off slowly, ending in a little more than a whisper that faded into the breeze. But only a few lingering seconds passed before 𝐶𝑳𝐵 seemed to catch herself, blinking and restoring a brighter smile to her face.
Well, let me show you what I usually do here. It's an easy chore and very calming. I think you'll like it.
It was impossible to just ignore the brief moments that came over 𝐶𝑳𝐵, where it seemed like she wasn't aware of Esther's presence at all. But then again, after being alone for so long, it was only natural that she'd fall back into her own thoughts now and then.
I'm ready. With these brooms, sweeping is involved somehow, I assume? It is! What a clever guess! Come. I always start over here, in the northwest patch.
What are we sweeping? Leaves? Gently taking Esther's hand, 𝐶𝑳𝐵 led her over to the first row of graves. She demonstrated how she cleared each headstone of stray leaves and surrounding weeds, and once or twice a week, picked little bunches of flowers to rest beside the markers. Like 𝐶𝑳𝐵 had said before, the task was easy and calming. Despite her initial hesitance, Esther soon found herself enjoying how peaceful the cemetery felt, and honoring the dead certainly seemed like a worthwhile effort. Yet, despite the soothing lull in thoughts it afforded her and the secluded beauty that surrounded them, Esther couldn't shake a sense of uneasiness that tingled at the nape of her neck. A sense that they were not alone in the cemetery. Oh boy. It was completely irrational, and she couldn't explain it, no matter how hard she tried. And even in the daytime, with the sun's gentle afternoon rays filtering through the trees, Something about the graveyard's shadow struck her as peculiarly haunting. Oh, what are you setting up, game? As evening began to slowly settle over the forest, the two girls made their way back to the manor. Despite her tiredness, Esther's heart leapt at the prospect of finally beginning her research once they arrived. And, true to her promise, 𝐏𝐸 took Esther straight up to her father's study. Oh, here we go. It's the good stuff now. By the time they arrived, however, the towering bookshelves blocked out most of the remaining sunlight, so they had to fetch a few candles to alleviate the gloom. According to 𝐏𝐸, she used such light sources sparingly, as non-wood fuel was difficult to stockpile. That was just what I was about to question, so thanks for answering. Luckily, there were a few types of shrubs and trees in the forest that she could extract wax from, as well as seeds and nuts that could be crushed for oil. But since Esther was a special guest, 𝐏𝐸 reassured her that she could light as many candles as she needed during her stay. Oh.
It feels so long since I've seen any candlelight in this room. Well, it has been quite long, I suppose. The last time was when Papa's still around.
Setting a newly lit candle down on the desk, 𝐏𝐸 let out a quiet sigh. 𝐏𝐸, your father, I've been meaning to ask, what was his name?
Oh, his name was Isaiah. It's so strange to say it out loud, since I never called him that. I only heard someone use his name once, back when I was very small.
She fiddled with the hem of her dress, her gaze drifting away from Esther's.
I'm sorry about the mess in here. All these loose papers will probably make it hard for you to find what you're looking for. Papa never liked to throw things away, especially not his letters, not even his little scribbles or notes. You can read any of them you like, but well, Papa always told me not to peep at his writings, so even now I try to leave them as they are. He'll probably think I'm very silly for it, I'm sure. I can help you with anything else, though. Would you like me to sort out the books, maybe?
No, it's all right. You've been very kind to me already. I don't want to push you any further. Her words were quiet and gentle, but firm. She didn't want to take advantage of 𝐏𝐸's generosity, and although she'd never mentioned it directly, Esther also needed some time alone.
All right then, I'll leave you to it. If you need me, I'll be in the kitchen fixing up dinner. You can come down whenever you're ready.
Beaming at Esther encouragingly, she turned towards the door, lifting her hand in a little wave.
Good luck.
Thank you. All right. Oh, wait, what? As 𝐏𝐸's presence faded away, the study's atmosphere steadily began to shift. A dark, grim cloud of memory seemed to hang over the room, specters of unending nights and restless sleep. Although Esther couldn't pinpoint exactly why, she had the distinct sense that this chamber belonged to a deeply troubled mind. Oh. Clutching a candle in one hand, she started to scan through the shelves, her eyes flicking across the numerous titles. 𝐏𝐸 was right. Her father really had collected a staggering assortment of books. But as she glanced over the various titles before her, Esther noticed something unusual. Despite Isaiah's obvious focus on alchemy, there seemed to be almost as many books on ghosts and spirits, and a number of treatises on the supernatural. Were they related to his search for a cure at all? Or was there some other reason for his apparent obsession? Esther couldn't understand how ghosts might be related to the Pale, so maybe he'd simply found them interesting to research. Still, the anomaly stuck out in her mind, leaving her with a nagging set of questions. Oh boy, I hope Isaiah's not around. As she opened up a large book on biology, suddenly a loose leaf of parchment fluttered out. Esther bent down to pick it up, turning the aged paper over in her hands. It looked like a journal entry, but there was no date to be found. Curiously, squinting at the messy script, Esther brought it over to the nearest lamp and began to read. What does it say? Oh, okay. Most likely Isaiah's letter. 7 days have passed since Amaranth left me. 3 days since Jeremiah told me he saw her with another man, her previous husband, now miraculously returned from his absence. I cannot eat, I cannot sleep. My heart bounds with manic energy between rage and this crushing sense of abandonment. In the depths of my darkest moods, I look back on the long months of her pregnancy, months that I spent on carpentry, furnishing, cleaning, planting, remaking this dusty tomb of an estate into a family manor. All for her. All because she could never stand life in the dreadful city. And where is she now? Back in his chambers, no doubts embracing him in the darkness so that she might hide the shameful stretch marks of her maternity. Damn her, that sycophantic wretch. Damn her and her lecherous, adulterous bastard of a husband. Oh, how I used to wonder what such a beautiful soul as her might have seen in a waste of flesh like him. But now, with the veil lifted from my eyes, I finally understand. They are alike, two souls perfectly matched in their shallowness and fickle attentions. What a ridiculous fool I was, ever believing that she might come to truly care for a penniless researcher, one with nothing to offer her but himself. And now, what am I left with? A small child, and no mother to raise it. An old family home, and no family to fill its many chambers. A retirement from my life in medicine, without anything worthy left to retire for. No, I refuse. I refuse to let her triumph over me. I will remain here, away from that toxic conurbation, isolated among the fruits of my sweat and labor. With these foundations I have laid in the land, I know I can survive solely by myself, without recourse to the city's indulgent pleasures. Here, amidst my tomes and papers, I will press onward in my research towards the last and most important focus of my life, a cure for this disease. And as for the little girl, we look nothing alike, she and I. Indeed, now that I am privy to her mother's treachery, I suspect her father may be another man entirely. The little hairs on her head are purely golden, and everything from her eyes to her lips is nothing but a bitter replica of that woman's features. She even has the self-same twinkling, uncaring laugh, as if the world could never touch her, nor dare to make her cry. The very thought irritates me to no end. I cannot bear the sight of her, an unending reminder of the future that was stolen from me. Thus, I am resolved. I will take the girl to the city and leave her in the hands of the orphanage there. A less cruel fate, no doubt, than to remain forever imprisoned with an unloving father. In the end, I know I could never truly amount to anything more for her. Well, holy smokes, was that a bombshell? As Esther's eyes drifted across the page's last words, she felt a strange, uncomfortable sense of guilt in her chest. The girl he was talking about, he had to have meant 𝐏𝑚𝐥𝐞. Did he really feel so bitterly towards her? Isaiah hadn't taken his daughter to an orphanage, but his resentment of her sounded deep-rooted. It felt invasive and overly intimate to be reading his private thoughts, but did she really have much of a choice if there was any chance Isaiah's writings hinted at a cure? She had to go through everything, including his journals, in case he mentioned any important research. Otherwise, there was a very good chance she'd missed something. Tucking the journal page away, she hastily pushed the book back into its shelf. Now, she was even more glad that she decided to search alone. Some parts of the past were better off remaining buried, it seemed. Well, attempting to banish the journal page from her mind, Esther combed through a few stacks of papers and books lying around the study, scanning through them in an attempt to glean any useful information. But her exhaustion from the day's work, along with the esoteric, erudite nature of Isaiah's research, made it increasingly difficult to concentrate. Perhaps she was better off returning the next day, when presumably she'd have more energy to scan over things. Well, this man is a troubled man. Leaving the study with a faint sense of disappointment, Esther made her way down to the kitchen, where she could hear 𝐏𝑚𝐥𝐞 working happily away. She prepared a rich, hearty vegetable stew for their supper, and a delicious pot of tea to accompany it. She's the best. As night fell, they shared their meal at the little kitchen table, warmed by the nearby cozy hearth. Unlike their quiet lunch, 𝐏𝑚𝐥𝐞 kept up a lively, mostly one-sided conversation all the while, as if she'd suddenly thought of 100 more things to say in Esther's absence. Still, it felt so comfortable, somehow. The normal pressures of acting sociable didn't seem to apply around 𝐏𝑚𝐥𝐞, who seemed content just to share Esther's presence, even if the older girl rarely spoke. A peace Esther had only felt before when she was alone. How unfamiliar it all was.
Esther? Esther, are you all right?
After they'd finished washing the dishes and wandered back into the parlor, 𝐏𝑚𝐥𝐞 gave Esther a curious, slightly worried look.
I think you could use some rest. You look really, really tired. You did work very hard today.
She couldn't deny 𝐏𝑚𝐥𝐞's observation. It was becoming steadily more of a struggle keeping her eyes open, and her muscles ached from so much unexpected use.
You're right. I should sleep, so I'll have the energy to go through the study more properly tomorrow. You should rest too, 𝐏𝑚𝐥𝐞. Yes, of course. We should be able to go through the chores more quickly tomorrow too, since you're an expert now. Well, I'll see you in the morning then, Esther. Sleep well.
After pausing for a short moment, she gave a playful little curtsy with a smile, to which Esther nodded in response. But as she started to turn towards the stairs, 𝐏𝐚𝐥𝐶 hesitated again, glancing back at Esther somewhat shyly.
Esther? You probably aren't very comfortable, right? I mean, wearing your normal day clothes to sleep.
The thought had barely crossed her mind, but 𝐏𝐚𝐥 was right. Her traveling outfit wasn't exactly the most pleasant thing to rest in.
I think you're too big for any of my clothes, but if you'd like, I could give you one of Papa's old shirts to wear at night. He was really tall, so it would be like a nightgown for you.
Only if it's no trouble.
No, not at all. I just... If you're going to be staying here for a little while, it makes sense, doesn't it? You can't be wearing the same thing all the time. Anyway, I'll be right back. Stay there just a moment.
Taking off in what was almost a sprint, she bounded over to the stairs, vanishing up them the next moment. Esther barely had to wait a minute before she heard returning footsteps and spotted 𝐏𝐚𝐥 fluttering through the foyer like a white rabbit.
And here we are.
She unfurled a huge black shirt from beneath her arm, flourishing it like a grand cape. Esther tentatively reached out for the shirt. Thank you. Even though it was probably silly of her, she couldn't shake a sense of guilt, agreeing to wear something that belonged to a person so recently deceased. 𝐏𝐚𝐥's father, no less.
Well, you can go change in the kitchen if you like. I'll wait here.
The same feeling didn't seem to bother 𝐏𝐚𝐥, who gave Esther an eager, nearly impatient smile.
All right.
After a brief pause, she relented, moving to retreat into the kitchen. It was quite chilly away from the fire, so Esther undressed quickly, goosebumps raising on her arms as soon as she unbuttoned her blouse. Once her clothes were hastily folded up beside her, she pulled a shirt over her head, immediately thankful for the loose warmth it provided. Are we gonna get a new character? Oh, wow.
You look dashing in black, Esther.
How does it look? She wandered back into the living room, hesitantly shifting her gaze over to 𝐏𝐚𝐥. The soft, loose fabric hung over Esther's frame like an oversized dress, her arms lost in the flowing sleeves. It smelled remarkably clean. 𝐏𝐚𝐥 must have kept washing her father's clothes all these years.
Wow! It really suits you, Esther. Just like a cozy nightgown.
𝐏𝐚𝐥 gasped with delight, clasping her hands together and beaming brightly. You weren't lying about it being big. She raised one arm to study her dangling sleeve, feeling somewhat embarrassed about how ridiculous she must have looked. Still, she had to admit, it was much cozier than her blouse and skirt. It also made Esther feel a little more at home, instead of a wanderer simply staying overnight. Thank you, 𝐏𝐚𝐥. I promise I'll take good care of it.
Aw, you don't need to be so formal, Esther. It's only a shirt. But I'm happy you like it. Papa was always very practical, so I think he'd be glad to know his clothes are being put to good use again.
A gentle smile crossed Sana's features, carrying a trace of both sadness and warm affection.
Well, now that you got something nicer to sleep in, I suppose it's bedtime. Good night, Esther. Sleep well.
Good night, Sana. Thank you again. With that, as the girls are off to bed, I should be too. So let's close the page on this evening's story. But of course, there is still more left to tell. So stay safe, take care of yourself, and please return here whenever you wish. This is Night Novel, signing off.